Morning, everyone. It's also great to just be in a setting which you have so many people and you're not, sitting in your chair in your study room with a little, 14-inch screen to stare into. I've almost forgotten what it feels like to be here, and so thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. So where do we start? I think a couple of things. One is when you get mic'd up this way, you're always tempted to say, Houston, we got a problem, right? It's, that feeling never goes away. And the second is, I think, it's most cliched when we say, times are changing, right? I mean, I showed up in a polo neck today because I thought, I would be in a jacket if this was 3 years back. I was like, times are changing, for me to explore new things as well. But what we're going to talk about is really, I think, in the space of the workplace, right? Which is really at the one level, the spine of any organization. What's really happening there, and what are the opportunities, and what are some of the realities we are facing, and where can we go from here, right? So we'll cover a few things, and let me skip to the next one. I've already got the clocker kind of time, counting me down. So let's first start with today. How do businesses really behave, right? And I think I don't know how many of you play Minecraft. I've played it very sparingly, to be very honest. My son is an exponent at it, which is a bit of a worry for me, but that's a story for another day. When you look at Minecraft as a game, right, what happens is you get a set of things for you to build with, right? And so the most progressive companies think that, hey, I'm Minecraft. I'm giving you flexibility because I'm giving you the tools, and you can create the worlds that you want. Unfortunately, the people, right, have moved further along, and I don't know if you've played Roblox. In Roblox, you create worlds that others use and play with, right? So while people thought it's super progressive to be the Minecraft, people are expecting you to be the Roblox, right? And that's really where we are, where it doesn't matter how fast, as organizations, we think we are leveraging and running, we're really running up an escalator that's moving down, right? And the pace of that escalator is just going up a few notches every time. Something for us to keep in mind as we talk about. So what's really disrupting workplaces? There are really 4 aspects of it, and the other thing to also keep in mind is a lot of people talk about the pandemic being the reason things changed. And at least in my personal opinion, I don't think that's the case, because I think the workplace was always ripe for disruption. Because, see, transformation is something has obviously existed from time immemorial, but the pace of transformation has never been faster than it's been in the last maybe 5 to 7 years. And technology obviously is one of the key drivers, the enablers, that enables us to transform. But to me, workplace was always ripe for disruption because there were enough enablers to help disrupt it. I think the pandemic just put this on an accelerated time frame, right? So the pandemic achieved, it's wrong to be virtuous about it, but it did help us achieve in 2 years what would otherwise maybe have taken 5 years and 10 years, who knows, right? But we know the reality now that it has led to disruption. And there are really 4 aspects of it that I want to talk about, and in that just share our journey as well. If there's anything that others can learn from, take away from, that would be absolutely awesome. But really use our example somewhere within this to just talk about the 4 aspects. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are the 4 aspects that I feel are the pillars on which disruption is happening. So let's start with people. I think people is both the biggest proponent of the change, the biggest beneficiary of the change, and the biggest disruptor here. And that's because all change, in the history of humankind has always come from a human yearning to make things more convenient. You go back to fire, to the wheel, to anything, right? Any transformation has always been the quest to make things more convenient. And I think what people have grasped onto in the last 2 years, even more so than before, is that how do I really take control of how is it that I want to create impact? Because what was happening before this was the workplace or people or the companies were basically saying, I need you to work in a certain manner, at a certain place, within a certain particular work hours. Maybe the end is a little stretchable, but not the start, right? And so I'm giving you all these frames, and I want you to operate really well within these frames. And what people are saying is, that doesn't matter. You got to judge me by my impact. How I work, where I work, how I do my work has got to be my choice. I think that's the biggest switch. The power has gone from the employers to the employee. In fact, someone said this very nicely. I wish it was me, but it's not. Who said, think about the people in your organization as volunteers, right? Because when you think of them as volunteers, you truly realize you have no leverage anymore. And you are required to create a compelling environment where they choose to come in and practice their craft to create value in service of a larger good. I thought there cannot be a more stressful quote to a CEO, and there cannot be a more empowering situation if I was kind of part of any of these teams. But I think that's the big switch. Now, what's happened because of that, the disruption is that people want the choice. And it doesn't matter, you hear all these quotes that, is it a 1-day week, is it a 2-day week, is it a 5-day week, is it a 3-day month? It doesn't matter what it is. People want to make the choice of what it is, which means the disruption now is, and this is what we done at Publicis Sapient, we basically said, look here, the switch we are making is the model will now work for you. You will not work for the model anymore. Which means you're really putting people at the center of how we're designing, how we run as an organization, right? And that's, I think, what people need. They want the power of choice, whatever the choice may be. The flexibility is really going to be, but measure people by impact, definitely, right? But that's, I think, that's kind of switch one. The second one is, of course, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is technology. Technology is what is enabling all of these to become reality. I mean, right from in the early 80s when I used to watch Star Trek on Doordarshan on, maybe a lot of people in the audience may not identify with that era, or may not even have been there potentially. But, you watch Star Trek and you saw people talking to each other on screens, and you're like, oh my God, this is like brilliant. That's what we do today in video conferencing. So technology is what makes our dreams real. And if I look at it in the context of this disruption, technology is what is making people's ability to really exercise that flexibility more real. So you look at the collaboration tools, you look at the asynchronous ways of working, you look at everything that's here and beyond. I mean, and I must, obviously as a good professional, I must use the word metaverse once in a week, otherwise, I'm obviously failing my ilk. So, if you look at the metaverse and the promise that it really holds, is that today we all operate in a world of binary, right? Either we are virtual or we are in a physical context. We're missing this whole continuum in between, which is actually hybrid. So the other thing is I hear a lot of people talk about hybrid, but when they say hybrid, they mean everybody is remote. But there's a whole continuum in between. And I think what the metaverse really does is it joins it and makes it a lot more real. And we're just scratching the surface right now. I'm sure if we were standing here and having this conversation 3 years from now, we'd be just talking about so many other immersive ways in which we'd be creating quasi-physical contexts, right, in the virtual world. I think there's just a mind-blowing level of possibility out there. But that's what technology does. It makes it possible for us to achieve our dreams, which means we have to be leveraging technology in a way that allows people to truly be in their best configuration that renders them most effective. And that's really our quest as organizations. I mean, that's what technology is in service of. I'm not a huge fan of technology for technology's sake, but that's just cool, right? But that's not valuable. Valuable is when technology is truly in service of creating impact, creating value. So let's talk about digital resilience. Now, this is, of course, one of the, it's not the pluses, it's one of the watch-outs, right? That as we talk about all these disrupted workplaces, we talk about highly hyper-distributed teams, organizations, one of the things that's changed is that earlier organizations had the convenience and the comfort of really getting their arms literally around a workplace, which meant the way you looked at your security infrastructure, whether physical or, it's odd. I mean, every time I leave home to go to the office, because I work a lot more remotely now, I have to look for my swipe card. Earlier, it was almost like a second being for me, right? It was like I always knew where it was, and now I have to go hunt for it a little bit. And that's because the infrastructure of security for an organization was very, very tangible, very easy. Today, you've got people who are really operating from their homes in most cases, which means your last mile security is completely distributed, completely federated. I mean, think about a situation where you were working with clients who at one point said you cannot carry a smartphone into your team area, right, because of want of confidentiality, right, or risk of that. And now you have someone sitting in their house with 2 screens and working with the same client, and knock on wood, is there's never been any issues. But that's a huge shift. So now how do you create the level of resilience in your infrastructure with that kind of a new construct of how things are operating? That's, I think, so it's a trust but verify. I saw a booth outside around, and I don't remember the brand, so I'm sorry I can't do you any good service by recalling your brand here. But it's about how do you verify candidates? I mean, 3 years back, I'm sure someone said, I want to set up a team for candidate verification. It would be considered a pretty poor use of the budget, right? Today it's considered a very good use of the budget, that how can we do a trust but verify when it comes to hiring, because of just some of the cases we're seeing of impersonation, et cetera, kind of coming up. So how do you create security in terms of the way you operate? And one of the things I feel in doing this, which is not talked about, but I saw that in the question from Aishwarya, was around culture. Because I actually think there is a very strong linkage of who you are as an organization and how can each person play a role of enhancing your security. When each person is actually playing the role of what I would call the citizen police, right? If it's in your culture to make sure we're doing the right thing, you will call out when something wrong happens. When it's in your culture to say, look here, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just one more cog in the wheel. Something's going on, it doesn't affect me. How do I care? Let the water flow on, and that's the difference. So to me, culture actually has a strong role to play in how we actually manage more evolved structures to work still as cohesively and still within the, the bounds of how we will need to from either a legal or regulatory or any other standpoint. And coming on the last, but definitely not the least, is the infrastructure, right? And this could be right from, do we have ergonomic desks at home, which is a fairly favorite topic over the last 2 years, to the other one is, what is the role of the office anymore? Do we need one? So I asked people in my organization 3 questions. And their answers have always left me very humbled and therefore educated. First is, do you want to come to the office? The answer is always yes. Do you want to come to the office regularly? The answer is always no, right? Do you want to come to the office to work? And the answer is always maybe, right? So, if you kind of parse through this and, figure out, where is God in between all of this, what you realize is that people seek connection, right? But they're not necessarily seeing the office as a place where they practice their craft necessarily, right? But there is a role for the office. So when you think about that, what are we doing at the offices then? So this is also a good time for me to just quickly call out what I call digital transformation and what I call digitization, right? If you think about the caterpillar becoming the butterfly's transformation, then digitization is just a faster caterpillar. So now when you look at a lot of the organizations, they're like, hey, when people come back, then we just need to make sure there are more video conference booths. And we have this and we have that. To me, that's the faster caterpillar, right? But what we're not taking a step back and appreciating is, we just need more collaborative spaces because people may just come back for a team lunch. They may just come back to get together and connect and talk about, a team day together to get them rallied up for the journey ahead, for the next milestone. Or if it's, it's any organization, whether services, manufacturing, any of that. I mean, these could be different. So we'll actually have to think about what is the role of the office in our context and be brave enough to actually break a few molds on this. Because I think the role of the office is going to be very contextual. And as leaders, we'll have to face up to it and be very comfortable taking a few left turns here. I read this great line somewhere that said, office is the new club. And it's not untrue. I read about an organization that got 20% more attendance because they ripped out one of their floors and made it a running track, right? Hey, 3 years back, you might have got the person checked up, but today they're being hailed as, that's it. That's the kind of people we want to be. And so we don't know what our people want. And there's one very easy way to find out, which is ask. So the more we engage with our people, that's what we do, is that we're completely subservient to understanding what is it our people desire, what really gets them in the highest mode of flow, right, which really keeps them one with the work, with the world around them, for them to create maximum impact. I think that's going to be. So I think this is, again, another space where there's just tremendous opportunity. This is like, kids in a candy store, right? What do we do with our office? I think this is going to be an incredible space. And if you're not boldly venturing into this, I think we will miss out on some of the other pillars, especially the people one, because people are looking for signals from the organization that, are you truly being about putting us at the center, or is this a very well-managed PR exercise, right? And when the lights go off, we're back to usual, right? This is just a well-put-on show. So I think that's what people are going to hold us accountable to. So for us at Publicis Sapient, it's been, at one level, a very simple journey about saying, hey, our values are about putting our people at the center. So how do we really work together? How do we, as I said, make the model work for our people? We've given our people the options of, do they want to work primarily remotely? Do they want to work from the office in a more rotational manner? Do they want to primarily work in the office? The other thing I've heard people tell me, which is fascinating, is I may choose to work 5 days a week in the office, but that's my choice. Don't tell me what the organization's choice is, because that feels definitely less flexible. So that's important. So for us, I think our approach of working together, figuring out what our people want, how does that work, how do we enable all of those things to happen, but also along with our clients. Because our first worry was, hey, we are a services company. At the end of the day, if it doesn't work for our clients, how will it work for our business? And it's been fascinating for us. The more conversations we've been having with our clients, what we've come to realize is that no one knows the answer. Everybody is exploring together. Everybody is growing together, right? And what I mean by that is there is no right answer. There is no one right answer. So a lot of clients are actually asking us, tell us, what are you doing about this? How are you thinking about your office of the future? So we call it working in the next. And we're like, here, this is our philosophy. And they're like, okay, this part works for us. Some of this doesn't work for us. How could we still work together and make it happen? But these couple of things you're doing is very interesting. We want to try that internally as well. There have been organizations that have sent out an edict saying, if you're not in the office on Monday morning, consider it your resignation letter. And they only had 40% people show up. And they didn't fire the other 60%, right? So, where does that go, right? So I think we're all going to grow together because we're all figuring out what the answer is. And none of us is an expert at it. I know I'm not. I know our organization is not. We're trying, we're experimenting, we're learning. We feel we're succeeding on some fronts, and we're definitely learning, educating, pivoting on some of the others. So Freud gets quoted for many things. I thought, let's pick something which is a little off to the left, right? And I love this quote, which is about, how do you really get people to be at their best is when you can get someone to love one's work. And see, all of us have a craft that we are passionate about, which is why we are where we are. And the best thing that can happen is for us to be able to practice our craft in a manner that gets us most excited about being able to do it. There are people who have a craft they're passionate about, but cannot practice it because of other constraints that come in the way the workplace is configured, right? Whereas today, we have an opportunity. We truly have an opportunity as a collective. This is not about just Publicis Sapiens. I think as a collective, we all have an opportunity to really render a configuration for people to practice their craft so that they're really being at that, as you said, when you have that cognitive, physical, and physical performance at its peak. And that's because everything else, you're allowing that to be enabled so that the person is truly the center, and their ability to create the maximum impact is fully enabled. I mean, that to me is just from a societal standpoint, is just an unlock that's unparalleled. And we have that opportunity today, which otherwise we may not have had, or might have had some years in the future. The question is, we have that today, but more importantly, what are we going to do with it? Is, I guess, the thought I'll leave you with. Right? So thank you very much. I appreciate the patient hearing. And any questions, I'd love to be able to provide any perspective, or if someone else has any perspective to share, that'll be even more exciting. On the last? Yeah. So I think it's two things. See, everybody loves something that they do. And usually they're not able to do that because of other things that may come in the way. So we have an opportunity to create both the environment so the person can carry the passion for their craft into that context and be far more effective. It's absolutely. If it was easy, we'd already done it. Totally. I mean, I agree. None of this is easy. Just because it's simple, doesn't mean it's easy to do. I completely agree, which is why all change is, tough. But on the other side of it, is magic. So, and I think, we're making some headways. I'm sure a lot of others are as well. So, for example, if we look at, so I'll give you a small example on talent acquisition, right? We have a few large offices in a few, obvious cities in the country. In the last 2 years, what this has allowed us to do is to actually hire people from places where otherwise we wouldn't have gone because they wouldn't have been able to shift cities. But these are incredibly talented people. So we have created an ecosystem by which now they are plugged in, and you just see that happen, right? So they're now able to be not only in love with their work, but actually make it real, bring it to practice. We are using tools now which allow us to, in an asynchronous manner, have teams work across geographies in a far more sustainable manner. Some people earlier said, look, I can't be doing this kind of a work because the time zones may not work for me. Now they're able to. So the more we're thinking about where is the friction points between people and value, and how do you take away the friction points, either with technology, either with policy, whatever it may be. That's the kind of the culmination that this slide refers to. If I can learn the back button on this. No, sorry, I'm not a quick learner. Okay, thank you very much.